meeting of the Littleton Conservation Commission to order. And our first item on the agenda for tonight is the approval of meeting minutes from June 21st, 2021. Does anybody have any edits, corrections, comments to the minutes? All right.
Make a motion that we approve the minutes of June 21st.
Would anyone like to second that?
I'll second.
All right, so we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. So let's see.
You get to be Carl tonight too.
I get to be Carl. That's a tough job. I don't know. Julie.
Julia Rupp, aye.
Brian.
Brian Crowley, aye.
Kyle.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
And Chase, you're not able to vote tonight?
Yeah, I'll be abstaining from votes tonight.
Okay. And myself, aye. All right, it's unanimous. Okay, so moving into the administrative discussion for tonight, we have election of chair. Did we want to postpone that until the next meeting?
I assume we would table that, yeah.
Okay. And then after that, we have emergency action 3 Sawyer Lane.
Yeah, these folks had a small sinkhole in their driveway, not a Florida style sinkhole. And it was getting bigger and the pavement was starting to crack. So I gave them an emergency certification. They haven't actually started the work yet, but their first step is going to be basically cutting the driveway so they can look down and see if the entire culvert needs replacing or just the middle section of it. And then he'll come back for me. So I think you just need a ratification if you are so inclined to the emergency action.
And Amy, is this isn't an enforcement order? This is
exactly. This is basically saying you can go ahead and do the work, basically because they couldn't wait a month or two to get an order of conditions.
Gotcha.
I think it's like the second one I've ever done.
Yeah.
Amy, can you remind me? Do they have to come in after they've completed it, or is it purely administrative through you at that point once they complete it?
It can go either way. What I basically told them is if it's basically sort of a cut and cover, if you will, then they're probably fine with what they have. If they do have to start messing around with the head walls, they, depending on how urgent it is at that point, would either need to come in before they do the work or do the work under my direction and then come in and make sure it's restored and all that. So I basically wrote the emergency action that the head walls would have to replace in kind, and they're big boulders that are starting to cave in, and otherwise it's lawn, and that would need to be restored and stabilized.
So would they need a certificate of compliance?
If they only have to do the middle cut, they don't need a certificate of compliance.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to ratify the emergency order of conditions. Is that what it is, Amy? An emergency order of conditions?
Emergency action.
Emergency action. Okay, for 3 Sawyer Lane.
Do we have a second?
Is it Lane?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, I'll go down the line again. Julie.
Julie Rupp, aye.
Brian.
Brian Crowley, aye.
Kyle.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
And myself, aye. And Chase, I'm going to keep doing that. Sorry. Okay, so it's unanimous. All right. Our next item is request for certificate of compliance, 93 Mattawanakie.
This were the folks, I think Susan might be here, if you need to have any questions, who basically built the wrong kind of deck from what was approved, ripped it out and redid it. And because it was no lawn, it is all planted with perennials and stabilized. So it's looking good again. And I think it's ready for a certificate of compliance unless anybody had any questions.
All right, so you've been out there, Amy, because you and I went out after they removed the wrong deck and then restaked the location, and then I think you saw the erosion controls. So if they've constructed and you've seen it since, I I felt comfortable with what they staked out. So I would say if you've seen it since then, I'd be okay with this.
Yeah, I have swung by a couple of times.
Okay.
Yes, these photos in their certificate of compliance application, that's the finished product. It looks
Yes, it is.
better than it actually looks like there's rain garden now than compared to what they
Yeah.
had previously. That looks much better than actual deck, not a patio.
All right. Would anybody like to make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance?
Sure. I'll make a motion
Go ahead,
that we issue a certificate of compliance for 93 Mattawanaki, DEP number 204-876, I think.
Yep. Second.
All right. Perfect. Let's see. Julie,
Julie Rupp, aye.
Brian,
Brian Crowley, aye.
Kaya,
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
and myself, aye. Perfect. Unanimous. All right. So let's see here. Next item is Enforcement Order 86 Colonial Drive Resolution.
Maybe just hang on 1 second. I think Kathleen Archer just logged in, and just to tell you, Kathleen, the commission did ratify the emergency order, so or action, so I can get back to you later about.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You
We
bet.
will have Tom out this week to take a look at what we're up against. Thank you.
Good deal. Thanks.
Good luck.
Thanks. The rain stops. Will be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so 86 Colonial, if you remember when, I guess it was when the house was built, they filled a little bit extra out to the edges and had 3 wetland creation areas they had to redo, which Norse Engineering or Norse, whatever they are, have been monitoring, and they had submitted the last monitoring report. And I've been out there. Everything looks nice and lush. It's really happy with all the rain. And it is definitely wetland out there. So if you agree, or if you want a site walk, what I would suggest is lifting the enforcement order, and then Liz, who is online, if you had any questions, could come back in and request a certificate of compliance, because this was done under a notice of intent.
Yeah, no, this is Liz. I don't have any questions. I just want to thank the board for working with me with this for the past couple of years, and I'm glad we are compliant and good and lush. The rain is definitely liking it over there for sure. And just want to know the next steps to get it off the deed and get the certificate of compliance complete, which I think, Amy, you sent me. So I have it filled out here, and I guess I just go to you once they make a decision.
I think if the commission agrees to lift the enforcement order, then your next step would be to submit that certificate of compliance, which comes back to the commission again for a vote.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Would anybody, well, actually, first of all, does anybody have any comments or questions?
I did a drive-by and concur with the lush, the lush appearance. I am still curious about that drainage down the road, which I know isn't Liz's problem. Did anything ever come of that? Like trying to fix some of the drainage at the top of the road? I know that was probably DPW too.
Yeah, when I spoke to the DPW, there was talk before the road was paved that they would put a manhole, and it was too late in the process to do so. So it really becomes my process because it's all draining, down here on me, and even the top of Colonial right now is completely underwater if you go by, because the manhole is just not, they were out cleaning them the other day, but this one is blocked. So I'm just getting everything.
Okay. All right.
And with this, we're looking at 2 years of growth. Do I read that right? It was planted in 2019.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
I feel like that's adequate to lift the enforcement order, and then with the certificate of compliance pending.
I would say for something of this magnitude, yes. I think for bigger wetland restoration projects, I'd prefer to see 3 years, but something of this size too seems reasonable.
Yeah, absolutely. And also because it's been so successful.
Yeah.
I just don't want to get it tossed back in our face at some point down the road when we approve something after just 2 years.
Well, it's lifting the enforcement.
That's right.
So Julie, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to lift the enforcement order on 86 Colonial Drive. And I don't see a DEP file number. Do I need one for this?
I have,
Was it 665?
I think it's 204665.
Okay. So hopefully 204665
I'll second.
to be verified by Amy. All right.
I'm looking at her paperwork, so I'm hoping it's right.
Okay. Should be.
I'm sorry, Brian, was that, who seconded that?
Yep, that was me.
All right, so we'll go down the line. Julie,
Julie Rupp, aye.
Brian,
Brian Crowley, aye.
Kyle,
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
and myself. Aye. Unanimous. Perfect.
All right. Thank you again for everything, everyone. I really appreciate you working with me.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Let me see here. We are 4 minutes away from the start of our first hearing of the night. So why don't we quickly jump to our next item, the request for certificate of compliance for 11 Edsel Road.
This is one, actually, Tom Mann's son, that actually has sold twice, and it only got caught in the second property transfer that there's an order of conditions sitting out there. And it was for a septic system replacement years ago. Everything's stable, everything looks fine. So I think this one's pretty straightforward for approval.
All right. Any comments, questions? Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for 11 Edsel Road, DEP file number 204-704.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, Julie,
Julie Rupp, aye.
Brian,
Brian Crowley, aye.
Kyle,
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
and myself. Aye. Perfect. Unanimous. All right. It is now 7:43. We've got 2 minutes until 7:45. What to do? Let's see here. A lot of these other items look like they're going to take a little bit more than a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So
Yeah, I think that the two Cloverdale things can get bumped to the end. MACC membership, I figure we can just table that until there's more people, more commissioners. Just the constructed wetlands park over at Long Lake, that really is just an update that they actually are going to move ahead with this. I think they're not entirely sure yet. They'll, was it Clean Harbors is going to be able to get out there with some equipment, basically park it on the edge and reach out and pull the stuff back to them. They're still messing with what to do with the dredge because it is going to be wet. There's no place to dewater it, and it's really expensive to haul it off when it hasn't been dewatered. I assumed it's a little weird because it is operation and maintenance, but that is also a flow through basin, if you will. So natural wetlands do go through it. In the past, you have called it a wetland. So I think because they are going to have to cut some trees, I was kind of assuming a notice of intent for this, just to cover it.
Yeah, it's not O&M when it's grown over so much that it's habitat and wetland.
Right.
It's just not.
Right. I think they kind of missed the boat with that.
Yep, unfortunately. And that's a pretty consistent interpretation across lots of different jurisdictions in the state.
Do we know what kind of timeline they expect to do that on? Or would like to do that on?
I think they're hoping to do it this year.
Yeah, I thought they had said this fall they wanted to get
They're working to get the proposal in and the costs, and they're looking for a place that's going to be able to take the dredge disposal stuff. I talked briefly with Aggregate. They said if it's not too much, and I don't know what not too much is, they might be able to take it. There's the quarry up in Westford that took a bunch of the fill from the point, but I'm not sure if they're accepting anything anymore. So there's not a lot of options. Unless the commission is willing to sacrifice that field, which actually was used for dewatering the first time around.
Yeah, I'd still come back and think about the like frogs and critters living in there, and if they just get transported to a quarry, they're done. I don't know. I'd be willing to consider it.
I've done this in the past. I don't know how deep the muck is out there, but once they dewater, you send a bunch of kids in there with waders and they can go catch frogs and have a fantastic time.
Yep.
Although there was at least one mean snapping turtle in there. So
In order to help them hit their timeline, if I generally agree, we want to see an application, but I would also be willing to entertain, some sort of pre-application meeting with them to make sure the I's are dotted and T's are crossed if it takes a little bit longer for them to get their paperwork done.
yeah, it might be worth a site walk. And they show me the area where they're going to need to be able to park the equipment, which I think is taking down, 3 trees, which they will replant, but it might be worth going out there and taking a look at it ahead of time.
Do you know where the trees are that they're going to have to remove?
It's near the sign, the kiosk sign, and the little parking spaces.
Okay.
On the side there.
I know there's a stand of knotweed in there that maybe they could take that out and access it there.
Yep, we talked about that. Although they'd really, their plan is basically just to roll the equipment across it, not do any excavation, but they might be able to do both or get highway in there to take care of it too. So.
All right. Well, shall we jump to our 7:45 p.m. hearing? Project updates, Smith Property, Sudbury Valley Trustees. Is there anybody from SVT here to speak?
Yes, I'm here.
Good evening.
I'm Laura Matei. I'm the Director of Stewardship with Sudbury Valley Trustees. I'm sorry that we can't meet in person, but I know it can be more convenient to Zoom, but it is nicer to meet in person. I wanted to give you an update on what we've been working on. I'm really hoping that some of the commission members could come out and see the site, see what we've been doing, see the progress we've made, and see what we're up against. We did start in with manual control this spring. We set up 2 areas specifically one for what is the excavation method, as I call it, that Noel Herman from Asian Bittersweet Control helped us with and provided some training. And then we also did, based somewhat on Mike Bald and Got Weeds, the carbon starvation method, trying to see how those will work. I did hire a couple of people to work on this, and unfortunately, one of the people had to leave early for personal reasons, and the second person that started June 1st has a really bad case of Lyme. So I'm down to 1 hired hand at the moment. But we did have Noel Herman come back, in fact, today, because I wanted him to come back and kind of re-energize us and make sure we're kind of on the right path in terms of his methodology. So that was helpful. The volunteers, I think, kind of dispersed with the release of COVID, so we didn't have a lot of involvement. I'm hoping that we can get them more involved again in the fall. But I do have concerns about poison ivy and ticks and Lyme disease, especially. Especially knowing that this young man who was working with us now has a really bad case of it. And the second thing I wanted to share with you was the finalized risk assessment, because I think that helps answer a lot of the questions you had the last time that we met. I know I certainly found it helpful because it really kind of went through each piece of how you evaluate the risk. And we were able to include more specific information on the residential and the town water supply well. And specifically, the conclusion that I draw from it, in the risk assessment, you're looking at concentration and toxicity times exposure. And the way I interpret it is that we're using such a small amount in such a careful way that the actual route to any exposure to humans or wildlife is extremely low. And based on that site-specific risk assessment, I am wondering if the commission would reconsider allowing cut and dab in the buffer area and reducing that vernal pool 200 to 100. Again, because the rare species biologists do recommend this method. But I'm also open to just answering questions about what we've been doing and how it's been going. And again, I'd really love to have you come visit the site so I can show you what we've been doing.
Hi, this is Anna. So are you saying that the manual control that you've been using, you're not satisfied with? Is that the consensus and you'd want to change that approach?
Well, no. So thank you for asking that, because I do want to keep going with the manual excavation, but I want to be able to increase our chances of success by being able to also do cut and dab on those large stems. Because I do, it's very tedious. I was out there this afternoon for a couple of hours with Noel and a couple of other people. But I want to keep doing that as much as possible. But we have a lot of ground to cover and a lot of bittersweet. So I'm trying to maximize our effectiveness.
Laura, can you educate me a little bit on the two different processes that you're using? So one is you called a carbon starvation process.
Yeah.
Can you educate me a little bit on what that means and entails? And I apologize if I'm making you repeat yourself from things.
No. It's basically, it's cutting the leaves as much as possible because you don't want the plant to be able to fortify its roots. The problem is that usually when you cut a plant, it just grows more because it really likes that. So you have to cut it enough. I'm not thinking it's going to be the best way to go for us in terms of kind of the most effective approach, but I wanted to give it our best shot and just see, how we could do with that approach.
And then the excavation method is, I presume, what it sounds like, right? You're digging out
literally we're excavating around all the roots of the bittersweet. So there's a lot of soil disturbance. It helps if you know your plants, because I know my plants, I'm able to say, oh, here's a winterberry, I'm going to protect this, and here's a black cherry, I'm going to protect this. So I can, while like today I was just kind of excavating around them, but I had to replant the ilex because it was kind of getting moved about by the excavation. So, clearly it's a lot of root disturbance, but, you're kind of weighing those costs and balance. And I still think I want to keep going with that method and see if we can, make that work as well.
Is that a surefire way of removing the plant, or are there still residual pieces that are able to grow back after that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I visited a site where Noel had did this in Acton, and he actually also went to that site, and it was pretty darn good results. So I was like, okay, let's try this. And as we're doing it ourselves, I'm always saying we don't want to leave those root fragments in that are just going to resprout twice or thrice as vigorously. So our theory is that we're going to get enough of the root mass, going down maybe 6 inches below the surface, hoping that whatever might be left would be small, maybe a little too low to make it back, maybe not have enough energy itself because it's so small. So that's kind of what we're going for, because we're not going to dig down, with shovels more than 6 inches in and start like really heavy excavating.
Now, One other question. Are you talking about using the cut and dab within the 50, or are you talking about using the cut and dab within the 50 to 100?
That's a good question. And I forget that you have that distinction. So, I mean, really, my question is based on this information. I wanted to get an initial read of what you thought about using cut and dab in those buffer areas.
So it sounds like there's been, you know, kind of a lack of personnel as well. I know COVID's been challenging, like personnel wise, for a lot of folks.
So I had planned to have 2 people, one person from early April through, it was an AmeriCorps member, so it's kind of paid, but not very much. So,
yep.
But she had to leave early, and I was planning to have 2 though from June 1st through the 3rd week of August. What happened was that she had to leave at the end of May. The person who started June 1st now has Lyme, but I was able to hire someone who started July 1st. But I think, as I said, I think in my update, what this tells me is that, again, I think we'll have probably more volunteer involvement in September, but I do want to rely more on people that we can train and pay to do things, even, obviously trying to use volunteers best we can, but I think that's what it's going to take to really keep it consistent. Again, there's the poison ivy, there's the ticks. Not everyone's going to want to do that, even if they're paid to do it. So, I think we can I intend to keep doing it. But again, I'm looking for a mix that we can really maximize, because there's a lot of bittersweet.
Can you give me a sense, Laura, of the amount of area that can be covered via one of the 2 manual methods you described versus a cut and dab method? I assume cut and dab is going to be faster. Is that a reasonable assumption?
Yes, it is. But, the reason why I'm really interested in this excavation method is just because it is pretty darn thorough. So, I was telling Noel, because he was concerned about a direct comparison, I said, well, we need to look at this over a few years. What is the time and effort that you put into it, and what are you getting out of it, and what are the costs? And cut and dab has been proven to be effective. So.
Do you know if there's a distinction with like stem diameter for cut and dab? Like, is it more effective on larger stems or smaller stems? I mean,
exists. When they get kind of pencil thin, I know different practitioners have different theories, but I would say like this pencil thin is where it starts to drop off, because it's such a small cut area for the.
So it would have to be a mix anyway. If you can't cut and dab the smaller ones, you'd have to do manual for that, right? So
yeah.
Mix.
Yeah.
I don't know how other commissioners feel, but I would feel I still would feel uncomfortable within the 50 using the cut and dab, but outside of the 50, possibly. I don't know how other people feel.
And I feel especially comfortable if we're minimizing its use by implementing some of these other manual methods. Then, it's not just a wholesale throw herbicides at it, but rather a balanced approach that uses it where it's appropriate.
Now, Laura, also, I was wondering if you're talking about cut and dab, but I remember before you were also proposing spraying in a limited fashion. So are you proposing that too, or just cut and dab?
For the resource areas, just cut and dab for those buffer areas.
All right, do we have any other board member questions or comments before we move on to the?
Yeah, a quick question, Laura. This is Kyle. Do you have the risk assessment? Is that based on the cut and dab or just spraying? There's
We base it on both methods.
okay.
You can see some of the description in there. I don't know if you had a chance to look carefully at that.
Yeah, so I was looking. Yeah, I see all the application methods and everything like that.
So it's essentially looking at that area where we are proposing to do the cut and dab, followed by a small amount of the spraying of just the low growth.
Laura, would it be feasible to do cut and dab in a small portion of the either 0 to 50 or 50 to 100, and then observe, mark off that area and essentially verify after a year or something that's not having an adverse effect on other wetland plants in the vicinity of the area where it's applied?
It's certainly possible. I'm also thinking about it because I'm wondering if we can share other sites where it's been done.
I'm also curious about the effect on trees because of the connectivity of root systems, that it's not communicating the herbicide to trees because the trees are really suffering lately. I don't know. I see a lot of them are affected by so many of the incoming invasives that.
Yeah. The area, the trees here, the red pines are dying anyway. The tamarack are not native. And really, eventually, we'd want to replace those with native trees. And again, based on the amount that we're using, and going into the bittersweet, a bittersweet is not a natural part of what you're talking about in terms of those tree connections. So it really wouldn't have that kind of an impact. And it really does, I know there are people in the audience who don't think this is true, but in my observation, it really does just kill the bittersweet.
I think it would be useful to have a site walk. I've been, trying to find some time to go out there anyways.
I think that would be helpful. And based on some of your questions, I'll see if I can get some information on some other sites. Because again, in my experience, there really isn't. There's, especially with the cut, you just don't have that impact on any of the other vegetation. I've seen that time and time again. With the spray, it's extremely limited. Like it's really quite impressive how you don't have that other non-target impacts.
I agree, Julie. I'd really like to do a sidewalk, especially to see the manual methods.
Agreed.
There's a dog whining in the background.
Actually, if I may, real quick, Andrew, I think there's some people that are here for the 6 Cottage Way continued hearing, and that will not be heard tonight. That's been continued.
5 Cottage Way.
Yeah, that will not be heard tonight.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Amy. All right, so do we have any other board member questions or comments before we move on to the audience members?
Do we want to set up a site walk or?
I think that's a good idea. Do we want to wait until the end of this particular hearing to do that? Or we can set it up now if you guys would like.
I'm all for setting it up while we got your attention.
Let's do that. All right, so what works for everyone?
I assume maybe like a 5:30 or something like that.
Yeah, and next week would be better for me than this week.
I'm trying to just open my calendar. Yeah, so I think like Tuesday or Thursday would be better for me. I can also sometimes pop out at lunch too, if for some reason I can't, at lunch, the midday hour, I usually spend some time too. That would be another option.
I could do Thursday.
Thursday's good with me too.
Like
The 22nd?
Yep.
Yeah.
5:30?
Works for me.
Works.
Great. I can make it too.
Even better.
Where shall we meet for that?
There's a parking lot at 199 Whitcomb Avenue. I also have some overflow parking spaces as needed.
I'll send out directions when I confirm this.
All right, perfect. So we're on for Thursday, July 22nd at 5:30 p.m. All right, so why don't we go ahead and open it up to the audience members. Members of the audience, if you could just state your name and address before speaking, that would be great. So does anybody have any questions or comments? Oh, Sandy, did you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Sandy Murray on Whitcomb Avenue. Laura, I have been quite favorably impressed by the amount of experimentation you have done, trying the different methods as we had requested. I think that the idea of the 50 to 100 foot buffer, if you could actually start anything in the 100-foot area and to see that it is actually effective, and then move in later on once you show that. Interesting with the different methods, but the one thing that still concerns me, especially in terms of the original approval, or postponement, should I say, is that of spraying. We've never really addressed the idea of spraying in terms of the bee populations. And I know I'm trying to do pollinator gardens, and many other people are as well. So spraying is never going to be very helpful for that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that for you, because the type of spraying that's done is very targeted to the plants. It would not at all impact, certainly not your pollinators, but in fact, it's going to help pollinators in the long run, because as we've been learning, our pollinators need our native plants. And if they don't have our native plants, we're not going to have our native pollinators. I'm also involved with the Native Pollinator Task Force that's been started up in our region. And in fact, there is an example of a site in Southborough where they used herbicides because they needed to battle bittersweet. And they do have some of the rare native bees there because they were able to bring back that native vegetation and dramatically reduce the bittersweet. But again, when we say spray, this is not aerial spraying. It's not boom spraying. It's a handheld controlled target on the plants themselves.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Stevens.
Hi, my name is Robert Stevens. We live at 28 Moore Lane, which is adjacent to the Smith Valley Trust, or Sudbury Valley Trustee property. Can I suggest that when you have the site walk, SVT gives a demonstration of all three methods: the spraying, the cut and dab, and the manual removal?
Thanks, Bob. I won't be be able to, I don't know that I'll be able to get like the real cut and dab in terms of a certified applicator on site, but I might be able to.
Do it with water.
Okay.
Just do it with water.
I'll see. Yeah,
I'll show
see
everybody what it is and what it is not.
Right. Yeah, I will see if I could get one of our applicators to come and do that for us, because I don't do it myself, so I don't have the yeah. Thank you for that suggestion.
All right. Sandy, you didn't have anything further you wanted to say, right? I don't know if I cut you off there.
No, I'm fine. Thanks.
No, fine. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So let's see. Who else has their hand up? Jessie Walsh.
Hi, I'm Kadra Walsh, actually. And
oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. I'm at 189 Whitcomb Avenue. I want to voice concern because what I'm seeing is that SVT has tried for one kind of 2 seasons with volunteers that, Laura has articulated as either, needing to back out or not being the most enthusiastic. And already now they're asking to walk back previous agreements. And one of the things that really concerns me about this is that, already we're talking about reversing the decision to allow the original proposal, which had a reduced a buffer around our wells. But also 1 season just isn't that long. And so that's concerning to me. I also just really want to encourage SVT with their volunteer approach. As an abutter, I've been interested in volunteering, but because people between the ages of 12 and 15 or younger are not allowed, it really kind of excludes like a third of the households in Littleton, because we can't decide for ourselves if, ticks or poison ivy is a risk that our families can shoulder. Just also, I would encourage them to utilize strategies that other organizations successfully utilize, like incentives, like raffles, contests, competitions, things that make this fun and encourage the community to go out. Not everybody resonates with going to war with nature. And so, I think there's a lot more that could actually be done to turn this volunteering into something that's a bit more invigorating. I also just, from the update, I'm very curious what SVT's plans for the Dames rocket and other non-woody invasives are that they don't intend to attempt manual removal of are. And then lastly, Laura stated that goat grazing was unfortunately expensive at $60,000 for 16 acres over 5 years. But I believe that the NRCS funds were $50,000 for a few years for 18 acres. And so it just made me think about how that's pretty comparable actually over the time, especially when goats fertilize the land. But moreover, it makes me think of, we don't complain that our organic bananas cost a little bit extra because we get the value of it. And I think if we're going to have a restorative land approach that especially honors the very strong will of the community, that these discussions are important and continuing to push forward is important. Thank you.
I can answer some of those comments and questions. In terms of the season of 1 season, you're right, Kendra. We definitely have to do this work for more seasons. What I'm saying is that now that we had completed the risk assessment, it gives the commission and others more information about what we're actually dealing with. In terms of volunteering, SVT has many, many years of experience of running volunteer programs, which are really quite effective. And in terms of the youth aspect, you had asked me about that. We do allow youth 12 and older to participate. The reason why we don't have younger people in this particular type of activity is because there's a lot of poison ivy and ticks. And I have too many problems with youth being really unhappy and their parents being really unhappy afterwards. And I'm not going to do that to children. So,
Yeah.
you know, if
That would be something we could leave to families to decide, especially when I do.
So what I'm going to say is this is our policy for the safety of our volunteers. And we're happy to have youth 12 and older participate, or 11 and older, I think is actually the age, with a parent or an adult. And we're also happy to have other adults participate as well. And this is a kind of a situation where also plan identification skills are important. So we want to make this successful. The other thing I wanted to comment was the goat cost. And just to remind everyone that goats don't get rid of the plants. They're kind of like a mechanical approach that mows the plants down. But it doesn't mean that it gets rid of the roots. So, you know, it's kind of a first step. And again, I wanted to use this property as an opportunity to test some different ways of control over time and see, you know, what we can do. Kendra also asked a question about James Rocket and some of the Forbes. So we're focusing on manual control of those on the west side of Whitcomb Avenue, which is a large area, quite honestly, to try to be pulling manually. But I wanted to give it a shot, and that was like a contained area that I felt like we could try. Again, it will require 10 plus years because I do have experience with this. So if it's an area that we can work in. Kedra's wondering, are we going to be using herbicides on the Forbes on the other side of the road? That's the question that she wants to know. I don't know yet. I really don't know yet. I read a report about using competing native vegetation, that kind of a situation. Maybe I can try that and see if that works. Maybe try to plow up some areas and plant it with some kind of, even if it's not native, something that could at least kind of restore some area initially. Then we have to try to get it to native vegetation. So it's a very challenging site, and that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you come see all the different areas and what's going on.
All right, thank you. We do have one other hand up. Tess Deegan.
Yes, hello. I am Tess Deegan, and I live on One Birch Road in Littleton, right by Long Lake. And I do want to commend you also for attempting this project, Laura. I have hired Noel in the past to clear my 1 acre of land of bittersweet and my adjacent neighbors' plants. We dug it up, and I think manpower is one of your problems. And in terms of the root disturbance, I actually have to say that it was helpful to disturb the roots, because then I had the opportunity to put in some natives as a replacement. So the Asian bittersweet did not come back. I think we cut and dabbed maybe 3 or 4 really large roots. They were about 8 to 10 inches. Because I'm right on the lake, I was very concerned about that. I never even considered spraying because that made no sense to me. We pulled, however, the berries and solarized them. I was wondering if that's something that you have considered in the past, because the berries get carried all over the place by the birds, and they are the ones that come up with.
Yeah, the berries are really, really high up in the trees on our site, like way up in the trees.
Oh. So then that's another consideration that,
yes,
you know, berries.
Yeah, that's where, you know, you can cut the vine. At least you're keeping the berries from producing up there in the sun.
Yeah, we climbed the trees and then pulled them down and solarized them and all that. So I'm in favor of the manual method, of course, and I'm wondering if there could be a balance so that at least the areas around the wetlands and the vernal pools and the wells can be just the manual labor if you have enough manpower.
Yeah, I'm not proposing to change the buffers around the residential wells at all.
Okay.
And in terms of the other buffers, again, we're trying to maximize, we're talking about 22 acres, not 1 or 2 acres. And it's a lot of work. So we're trying to maximize our effectiveness and our chance of really succeeding.
Have you considered hiring Noel?
Noel has worked with me a couple of times.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is wonderful. All right. Well, those were my comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there anybody that has a question or comment that hasn't previously raised their hand? And then Mr. Stevens, will jump back to you really quick, and then we will have to move on to our next hearing. We're a little behind. So is there anybody else? And then we'll jump to Mr. Stevens.
Hello, this
All right.
is Noel.
Oh, Noel.
Hi, I just heard my name. Thank you for, does that mean I can talk?
Sure.
Okay, great. So, hello, everyone. I want to thank Laura for hiring me to run a practice session for her staff that are interested in learning the manual approach, practicing the manual approach without using any spray, dabbing or otherwise. And so my point is very short. I just want to say, I think that the manual approach has a lot to offer. The cut and dab, the cut and dab it would be limited. I suggest that the cut and dab not be used in the vernal pool area or in the watershed buffer area. That would be my recommendation. And instead, I would recommend either the cut and prune method, which is brought to us by Mike Bald in the Vermont state of Vermont, who I know has worked with Laura as well. And so it would be the cut and prune as well as the uprooting method that I propose. It's not quite excavation, but it is extraction. And so that's a bit softer, I think, than excavation. So my last point is, I think that there's a great passion by people. You can see it on Nextdoor. I see it catch quite a buzz when someone says, I've got bittersweet and I don't know how to get rid of it. And you get a lot of proponents who say, well, just pull it down from the trees. Well, I think the better answer is to get at the root of the problem, which is the root of the problem. And on that, I'll let go. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Stevens, did you have one other comment to throw in real quick?
Yeah, I just was trying to make sure I understand the sequence of events that's going to go forward from here. Nothing's going to change. On the 22nd of July, there's going to be a site visit, weather notwithstanding. And then at some future time, the Conservation Commission is going to have another hearing like this where we can talk about the results and discuss any issues that might have come up. Is that correct?
That sounds correct.
Okay, and I've got a question for Laura. If manpower were not an issue, would you use cut and dab at all or any chemical at all if manpower was not an issue?
That's a good question.
And what's the answer?
Well, we're at 22 acres.
I don't care if it's 100 acres. If manpower were not an issue, would you ever use chemicals?
Right now, I'm trying to see if these other mechanical methods are going to work for us over such a large area.
So the first choice is use manpower and not use chemicals.
We have to make it work.
I understand, but I'm worried about chemicals in the soil. And this town is paying, what, $15 million down Whitcomb Avenue to take chemicals out of the water? I prefer not to leave that as a legacy to our children.
Right. Yeah. And again, this is a question where we're using very little amounts. And I think there needs to emphasize that distinction.
Is an ounce a little amount?
Pardon?
Is an ounce a little amount?
Yes.
If you had to drink it, would it be a little amount?
Bob, I think we should talk about risk assessment offline. Why don't we get together again? We'll talk about it more.
Okay, we do really have to get moving on to our next hearing. Okay, Drew, did you have one other quick comment?
Yeah, I just was gonna say, like, again, like on the amounts that are being used, I would second Bob that really our concern is in the soil period. You know, as is the case with PFAS, little doesn't necessarily mean benign, and we don't have all the information on the table yet about these chemicals. We are continually learning. There were revisions to the EPA document, and further, we don't have an endocrine study that's complete for these chemicals. And so little, you know, just makes me think of PFAS, which is really little, and yet is costing us a lot of money and a lot of concern. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, on that note, thank you, everyone. And we'll have our site walk on Thursday, the 22nd at 5:30 p.m. All right. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our
Thank
next.
you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, Laura.
Good night, everybody. All right, so our next hearing is Notice of Intent, 1 Chipmunk Lane, parcel U48-21-0, Mass DEP file number 204-937, construction of a foyer addition to front of the house. Is there anyone here to speak to that?
That's just me. I should have said continued public hearing on the agenda. He was asked to revise his plans just to put erosion controls around the stockpile, which he did show on the plan, and he also pulled it back so it's entirely outside the buffer zone. So I believe he responded to the commission's concerns. We're waiting for DEP's file number, which we got with no comments. So I believe it might be ready to close.
So DEP had no comment? I think that was the only outlet.
He had no comment, yeah.
All right.
All right, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing and issue a notice of intent for 1 Chipmunk Lane, Mass EP number 204-937.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, are there any comments before we close? All right, hearing none, I'll go down the line. Let's see, Julie.
Julie Rupp, aye.
Brian.
Brian Crowley, aye.
Kyle.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
And myself, aye. Unanimous. All right. So we'll go ahead and our next hearing is 5 Cottage Way, but that was continued as we previously announced. So if there's anybody here for the notice of intent for 5 Cottage Way, that was continued. All right. So moving right along, it is 8:28, and we'll go ahead and open up our 8:15 p.m. discussion. Enforcement order 144 Goldsmith Street.
Yeah, excuse me, Mr. Byron is here, but if you remember, that was an enforcement order I issued and you all ratified about 2 weeks ago. He's got a funny property that it's shorter than the rest of the properties around him, and he'd cleared outside of his property and more to our point, into the buffer zone. And he also wanted to put up a shed, but the shed location is outside of the buffer zone. I determined that in the field. And Mr. Spine, I don't know if you wanted to say anything or discuss your restoration plan.
Hi, yes, I'm Adam Byrne. I'm at 144 Goldsmith Street. As far as the restoration plan goes, I'm more looking to ask the Conservation Commission what it is you would like done there. I mean, I took out 3 live trees as far as what I actually cut down, and I did dig the stumps out of the ground. But there were several other dead trees that were all leaning into each other that I also had taken those out. As far as that goes, I don't know how many trees you would like to be actually replaced to compensate for what was already dead and fallen that I removed, or just compensate for the live trees. I'm willing. I made a mistake. I didn't realize that was the buffer zone, and I'm trying to figure out what it is that should be done here, rather than. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not 100% sure what the best route for me to go would be.
He did. I will also say there's a pile of stuff that you cut down. I don't know if you removed that yet or not. So that needs to be taken. at
Correct.
least
The,
out
the
of
brush
buffer zone.
pile is going to be removed. Yes.
Yeah, and the soils are, disturbed up, but they haven't been stripped or anything. So I
No,
think
not
the
at all.
soils-
And with all the rain and everything, it's actually growing in a lot more than I had thought it would at this point. I haven't planted anything. I mean, I would probably fill it in with some sort of wildflower mix after I do the plantings that are required.
He had recommended 5 mountain laurels and 5 rhododendron.
Yep.
And then the seed mix, the grass and wildflower seed mix on top of that.
Yes.
And my main response to that was whether or not the commission would want to see a couple trees in there as well, maybe a couple oaks or something like that. What was it that came down? I forget. Was it oaks or white pine or?
There was 2 ash and 1 oak.
Well, the ash are probably on their way out anyway.
I was going to say, would it be safe to assume those ash weren't going to last forever anyway?
Correct. And that's what pretty much all of the dead trees that were back there hanging in each other were ash trees.
Dead trees are habitat though too, but I think the mountain laurel, helps with some of that. I mean, oaks, we learned in Matt's talk recently that oaks are one of the most valuable trees you can have from a habitat and wildlife value standpoint. So I guess I feel like at least the oak, it would be appropriate to replace the oak.
Okay.
My sense is, in terms of expense and things, I'd rather see more mature trees planted rather than, a couple of more mature trees rather than 10 saplings or something like that. But I don't know what the right balance there is.
Would you say something like a 4 to 6 foot oak is big enough?
I'm very much
as
out of my
opposed to like a
depth.
little whip.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm thinking, is that, to go in and plant a bunch of small little whips is probably, they're less likely to, each individual tree is less likely to make it than a more mature tree. But also there's more cost and expense associated with more mature trees. So trying to balance those things.
Right. And then, I think too, from an expense balancing, so typically when you do plantings, you have 3 years of monitoring, and if whatever dies, you need to replace. So to Chase's point, seeing something bigger, maybe striking a balance of something big enough that has higher likelihood to survive, so you wouldn't need to replace it, and not buying a bunch of tiny saplings that are unlikely to survive. So just from the long game standpoint, it's kind of a win-win if you get, I think 6 feet would be appropriate from that standpoint. And then just going back to the snags, like a lot of people just aren't aware, especially since dead trees can be hazards if they're close to homes or structures, but dead trees are extremely valuable for habitat. So it's something that we value as well. But I do think, native shrubs, like mountain laurel, I think that would help with that. And, also in recognition that the ash trees, likely were on their way out due to the emerald ash borer in our area. Amy, is he going to have somebody forget Ed's company, or Matt, is there, the next step, typically people would, hire someone to do a planting plan, or do you feel as though we can work through it because it's a small area? I haven't seen it, so.
I think we can work through it. Probably it's not a huge area. It's sort of squared off. So I think if we have 10 shrubs and a tree or two, we can just scatter them through there when he has them, and I just show him some places to plant them, and then they can
Right.
seed it. But
And I think
About
especially
that.
given Mr. Burns' willingness to
Yeah.
help bring it around, there's no need to make this more expensive and onerous than it needs to be with an applicant who made an honest mistake.
I'm willing to do, whatever it is. I understand I did make the mistake and I do need to be responsible for it. So, I mean, I guess things happen, but it is my responsibility to fix it. So whatever needs to be done, I mean, obviously I'm going to do it. So.
Yeah, and I was just asking that for informational purposes,
Yep.
Honestly, because if we've had folks make a mistake with a very much larger area, and, so it was more of a technical capability question. So if you're comfortable providing the advice, Amy, that's okay with me.
yeah, it's also not much of a slope either, so we're not too worried about that.
Okay.
So how about maybe I write this up as a memo for the 5 mountain laurel, 5 roadies, and 2 oak trees. I assume probably red oaks. And that I don't know when you would be able to do this work. You'd have to find out when you can get the plants. And let me know when they're ready to install, and then I can come out there and we can just pick some locations to put the things.
Okay, that'll work. I do have plenty of availability typically, so I should be able to do that in a timely manner.
Is mid-July the right time of year to plant those?
That I'm not sure of.
This
That's
July.
I would say usually not.
Yeah. I figured
because
later.
I was wondering if you would want to wait till September, but if that's the case, we want to do some temporary stabilization out there, though. Maybe
So
get
it's
this.
fairly flat, right?
Yeah.
It is.
We
it's
put the seed mix down, right? You could,
I was thinking the same, Kyle.
at minimum, get the seed mix in. But
Right. Get the seed mix out, plant the trees and shrubs
Sure.
in a more temperate time of year.
yeah.
Okay, it's a plan.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
I
All
can give you
right.
some ideas on the seed mix too.
Okay, so Amy, you'll go ahead and draft a memo of the various plantings, and we'll take this up at our next meeting, maybe with an update, and go from there.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great
Thanks for
night.
coming in.
All right. And then let's see, continued public hearing for 11 Scott Road was continued to July 26th at the request of the applicant's representative. So we'll go ahead and circle back to our administrative discussions. And I believe we left off at the 11 Edsel request for certificate of compliance. I can't say certificate tonight. So next up we have, let's see, certificate of compliance for the Cloverdale Boardwalk, DEP file number 204-863.
Yep, so if you recall, especially when the boardwalk went in, DEP through the water quality certificate required replacement of the wetlands that each little post was going to sit on top of. So Highway excavated that. It's been 3 years, and it's come in very nicely. It was a seed mix, so a lot of sedges and rushes and some a few wildflower, almost 100% wetland vegetation in there. So that was also a success. And I don't know if you all want to do a site walk out there in general, because you also want to talk about the Cloverdale management plan. But I don't know if you had any questions about the certificate of compliance first. I'll take that for a big no. And then the Cloverdale management plan, which I think I left downstairs. Oh, here it is. There's a lot of bittersweet taken over. One of the areas that we're had said just mow it about once a year. And I do think it needs more mowing than that. Otherwise, it's just coming up like crazy. But I think it's worth a site walk because it's a sensitive area with the abutters. So
was one of these areas the issue that he just recently had? Is that what you mean by abutters, where the cops were called on him because he was mowing on a Sunday?
yes.
Did we get any clarification on that?
We did get the police reports, and they are allowed to do Sunday work from, I think it's noon to 7, something like that. I forget the exact hours, but it is allowed.
Okay. And has that been communicated to Jim?
Yes, Jim knows that.
And the abutter?
And the abutter, I have not talked to her, but the police report that he sent to her did say as much.
Okay. So everybody knows the relevant facts now.
Yes.
Okay.
And the appropriate facts.
I think I have some neighbors to talk to if you can't mow on Sunday morning.
Any private mowing can happen anytime they want.
Okay. Yeah, that's
it's a more public
grants.
Yeah, it's a more public sphere. Nice try.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like a site walk is a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the Eagle Scout out there, whose name is going to elude me right now, he did finish his little boardwalk on the sort of wet meadow area. So he mowed it right through that one. So you can take a look at that too.
Remind me where that is. Is that right at the end of the current boardwalk? It's still wet?
No, this one is if you go to the parking lot, instead of going straight down to the boardwalk, you take a right and parallel.
Oh.
There's one kind of intermittent stream. There's a crossing there, and then a really soggy.
Yeah, the groundwater seeps. There's groundwater seeps like along that little.
Yeah.
Okay. Should do a site walk. I get out there a decent amount. My kids really like it, but I haven't seen the new boardwalk yet. And we should go look at the bittersweet.
That's probably the main thing.
Yeah. You keep that under control.
I don't think. Do you want to try to do that next week, or do you want to wait until the week after? How many site walks can you do in a week? And the 26, I don't know if you remember the 26, 28, 30 Cricket Lane where they're demolishing the 3 houses and putting in one. That is coming in. I'm not sure if y'all want to do a site walk on that. And another one came in, which I can't recall what it was.
Were they trying to purchase that third property, or?
They got the third property.
They did, okay.
Yeah, that little red house.
Yeah, I can't remember what color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was, but yeah.
So I've been to that one. I don't feel like I need to go back to.
Yeah, I did not make it to that one.
To Cricket Lane. I'm out of nights this week to do anything. I get to run a public hearing to tell people there's bombs in their backyard. And/or baseball. That's like the rest of my week. But I could do something during the day, Amy. Again, maybe like the lunchtime hour to go walk out to Cloverdale.
Yeah, that would be better for me too, honestly.
That would be my availability this week.
Do you want to pick a day? The weather's going nutty, but.
Yeah. Probably tomorrow, Wednesday or Friday.
Either make a difference to you, Kyle?
I can't do tomorrow. I'm pretty tied up by midday.
Okay. Wednesday the 14th?
Wednesday and Thursday should work. Yeah, Wednesday.
Wednesday 14th, right at noon, or?
Oh, I'm on the 21st. Sorry. Yeah, noon works for me on Wednesday the 14th.
Perfect. All right, so I'll see at least 2 of you out there.
Okay.
All right, let's see. Next on the agenda, we touched on the Wetlands Park, O&M. which really is an O&M. And then,
Do we have to vote for the certificate of compliance for Cloverdale?
oh yes.
Either vote or wait until after the site walk, either one.
Oh, okay, you want to wait until the sidewalk.
Might as well. I mean, it's fine with me.
All right, so next up we have the Browns Woods parking area.
Yeah, just an update. I don't know if you've all been by there. Aggregate donated the gravel to finish off the little parking area where the house was, which was super. And they cut it in really fast. And Highway was going to spread it today, but obviously that got canceled because of the rain. So hopefully that'll be all formed up by the end of the week. And actually also SVT is going to have a weed warrior training. I don't know if you've heard of their program for identifying and how to pull invasive species. They're going to be holding that at Browns Woods Forest with Littleton residents on July 31st, if anyone's interested. I won't be there. And I also, we walked the boundary to check out the survey markers with SVT of the whole Browns area. So that's all been taken care of. A few minor encroachments, no big deal on any of those.
And I will just add on that, the Historical Commission did meet last week and was in favor of clearing around the foundation to kind of highlight that, and maybe we'll put up some signage to tell the story of the house or agriculture, in town as a whole. And the board was also interested in putting up a nice kiosk, like double-sided, with maybe a drawing of the old house and a description of the property. So hopefully we can have a nice historical component to the property as well. But
yeah, that's what I was kind of recommending. SVT might have money actually for a kiosk, which would be super because we can get that a lot faster that way. And I was, double-sided, so historical can have a side and MVP type sustainability can have the other side.
It'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be really cool if we had some like architectural drawings of the house or something like that.
Or some old photos. I'm sure the family has some old photos.
Yeah, old photos would be pretty cool too.
Yeah. And Colby Field had made some initial comment that he might be able to bring over his brush hog and clear out some of the foundations. So I'm going to talk to him about that. Because looking at it, it's not something you want volunteers to do. It's a mess. If you can get a machine in there, it's not in the buffer zone. It'd be a lot easier.
I actually had now that we were talking about the parking lots, I was noticing the Cloverdale parking lot looks a whole lot like gravel now instead of the,
the grindings,
the reclaimed grindings. And I recognize we put gravel down anyways. And I was just trying to remember, I think that kind of was set in motion a few years ago. I'm wondering if we should continue that approach for parking lots or if we should just use gravel or something that's not going to degrade. Is it just that parking lot's just really, it just really hasn't lasted? And I know it gets a lot of traffic, but maybe that's a discussion for another time. It was just something that I was noticing, and I just don't have a lot of experience with it, with the longevity. I wasn't sure if that was the intent, or if it was, kind of more of an experiment.
Yeah, well, let's take a closer look at it Wednesday.
Yeah, okay.
While we're standing there. Because that's the only, we used it over at Oak Hill on Harvard Road, the grindings. Yep. The Boxborough parking lot and Cloverdale are both more like gravel.
Yep.
Good.
Okay.
All right, so our next item is Eagle Scout Boardwalk at Cloverdale and the Town Forest Trails.
So I mentioned the Cloverdale one, and Brendan's moving ahead with the Town Forest Trails. He's had a crew out there at least once and has got 2 more work days going to get the trail done. And it's just been really wet and really hot. And so we haven't made much progress on the boardwalk, which is separate from the Eagle Scout piece of things. My husband and I took some of the posts and rails we rescued from Amazon that they donated to us and made a sort of boardwalk at the beginning because it was really muddy and the scouts were just tramping all through it. So we got some temporary stuff up there to get people through.
Excellent.
And actually, sort of on the similar trail thing, Rick Finley and I are going to have been talking to the Horace Mann School, which is the property just north of Brown property on the side of Long Lake, about getting a trail in there, which would connect Prouty down to Brown's Woods and Town Forest and all that, which would be huge.
Oh, that would be huge.
It would be huge. I mean, early discussions, but it would be great.
They were supportive of the MVP grant as well. I think
Yes.
they wrote a letter in support.
Yeah. That was one of the initial contacts we made, was to reach out to some of the neighbors.
That'd be great. I mean, you could connect Goldsmith to Harwood Ave, to Hadawan, and and then through that's
all the way to the train station. Yeah,
it's fantastic.
And at that point, you almost have a loop all the way around the lake.
Yeah, finishing that loop is going to be tough.
Yeah,
There's a lot of wetlands and some private property.
Yeah.
I think Rick has some ideas. We'll see.
Yeah, but that's a dream, that's for sure.
Yeah, but that did remind me, that's the other filing, is the little lots on Grimes Lane, south of Grimes Lane, are being developed, and they got a little carried away. So that was the other notice of intent that was filed. And that's probably worth a site walk to look at the wetland delineation. But we can get
You got carried away with what?
well, with not thinking they needed a permit, basically. And putting in the foundation without the foundation permit. Nothing's going anywhere. I mean, it's such a thick field out there. They didn't get into the wetlands or anything like that, but the one lot that is in.
This is between Grimes and Route 2, that like strip there.
Yeah, that field. I think they have 7 or 8 lots. I'm not sure if they're all buildable or not, but they're starting them. Stay tuned. You'll hear more in 2 weeks.
It's good. I can't wait to relive flooding those foundations. That was a lot of fun.
All right, so our next item is Director of Land Stewardship.
Yep, just let you know, Jim O'Neill has stepped down from being Director of Land Stewardship, or he's off the LCT board. So he said he's more than happy to keep working, but was trying to simplify his life. So I don't know if Don's got any grand ideas on that, but it'll be a while, I think, before there's a replacement.
Ooh, Dawn, do you have any comments from the trust board as to any possible candidates?
Unless he fell asleep during the last hour.
Hello, Dawn. Well,
you may have also been here because the select board did vote just before we went on air to not pursue the 61A on Whitcomb.
Oh.
Did they give a reason?
I just had like a little tiny summary that Judy actually sent me. I don't think they really gave a reason.
Holding
But
out their opportunities.
There are also several other properties there that might be of increased value or interest as well. So.
And before we move on, I just want to say thank you to Jim O'Neill if he's watching, for all of his years as Director of Land Stewardship. It's going to be a really tough position for us to match. I mean, Jim was really involved in pretty much everything going on around town. So, Jim, thank you.
He still will be. He's just not going to be the director anymore.
Yeah, what I heard from Jim is he's happy to help. He just wants to be the guy who takes direction rather than gives direction.
Certainly big shoes to fill. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. And
so, Andrew, I think you should take that job over. You've got every other one.
It's too much. Too much. All right. So I think
I do think we will need to have a discussion about trying to take more of that burden on from the town, as opposed to the volunteers in the trust. They do an immense amount of work, and especially Jim and Rick. And if they get sick and tired of it, which they're starting to, we're up a creek.
Yes.
Yeah.
feel like we've been beating that drum for a while. Sounds like
Yeah.
we need to beat it a little louder.
Yeah, highway has been pretty good. They've been taking over some of the mowing. I just kind of been sneaking it in there 1 year at a time. But the mowing in particular is a big piece, and you just lose stuff really quickly if you don't mow. So. Another time.
All right, so I do believe that's our agenda, unless there are any other updates or administrative actions that we need to review prior to closing.
Nope, I assume you still want to keep on with the virtual meetings, at least into the fall at this point.
That's what we agreed a couple weeks ago, or a few weeks ago.
Sorry?
Or one hybrid meeting. I think that's what we agreed on, right?
I want to see you all again.
All right. Well,
And I promise by next meeting, I'll go get myself sworn in. Sorry about that.
Oh, I have one question. Somebody mentioned that in the process of renovating the beach, that one of the kiosks there was removed. And I wasn't sure if that was put in by the CLC or us or what, but there was a kiosk.
I don't think it was anything that we put in, but they do have new ones to replace them. I think at the beach at 300 King and someplace else, they have 3. They just haven't put them up yet.
Oh, okay. Great. Thanks.
All right. Well, I do believe that's everything. Would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Oh, was it a very faint second?
I'll second it.
All right, so I'll go down the line. Julie.
Julie Rupp, aye.
Brian.
Brian Crowley, aye.
Kyle.
Oh, Maxfield, aye.
And myself, aye. Unanimous. All right, we're adjourned.
Thanks for coming in, Julie.
Great.
Yeah.
Have a good night.